Hi, my name is Ellen, but my real name is Bailey Field. Um, my first visit to iMatter was I'm 19. I'm actually local. My first visit to iMatter was in 2016. It was probably one of the greatest days of my life. It was raining, the mosh pit was full of mud. It was probably one of the greatest days ever. But, well, this story is kind of it's still a little difficult to talk about, but it is important that I do talk about it because I feel like my story is an example of you can get help and that you deserve it. At the beginning of senior year, 2016, I was probably about as happy as I could get. It was my last year of high school, thank God. I was dating probably one of the greatest guys I knew, and I had my whole life ahead of me. But, well, he was moving away, and I didn't want to deal with a long-distance relationship. After a year and 7 months, I had to call it off. It sucked so much. And I just kind of, before we had started dating, I had really terrible anxiety. Like, I would get panic attacks at least twice a month. And after we started dating, they stopped happening. And it felt like my life was finally turning around. But after we broke up, my anxiety started getting worse and worse. And then I went to London. It felt like things were going to turn around, but I unfortunately was very wrong. You see, when you go to a big, grand city full of rich history and buildings and just things that places like this hick city don't have, you go from grand to... Am I allowed to swear? Okay, good. You go from grand to Shitsville, and it's a culture shock, and it's really, really sucks. I kind of fell into depression pretty badly, and I didn't really know it. I thought it was just like seasonal affective disorder like I normally get, but this time it was worse. And, well, I was doing really bad in school because I was just so depressed I couldn't even do anything. I couldn't do my homework, I couldn't concentrate in class, I was just lost. I felt cold and empty, something that scared me a lot. And in response to that, my parents took my phone. I mean, because, yeah, I am addicted to my phone. I'm not afraid to admit that. Well, when I stayed behind one night for tutoring, and what I'm about to tell you does not represent my dad in any way, shape, or form. It's just a thing that happens, and it sucks. When my dad's the one to pick me up, he was always late, without fail. And I stayed behind at school for tutoring one day, and I got out at 4:30. He was not out there, and I was a little concerned. Excuse me. Sorry. It's that mutant monster. It gets you every time. Well, I wasn't too concerned, so one of my friends was hanging out there with me. I asked to borrow her phone, and I did. I tried calling my mother because, let's be honest, with all of our phones and our contacts, we don't really remember numbers like we should. The only number I know off the top of my head is my mother's. And when I called her 3 times, she did not answer. And then I started to panic. When I did finally get a hold of her, she called my dad, who did not show up until 5 o'clock. And by that time, I was nearly in full panic mode. And my dad, I don't even remember what he was pissed off about, but he was. And like I said, this is not a representation of who my dad is. It's just a thing that happened, and it was stupid. He was really mad at me. I don't remember why, but I was just feeling I had all these emotions going on inside of me at that point. And my dad, he doesn't understand what that's like because he didn't come from a household that dealt with mental issues the same way that my family does. And he doesn't quite understand what that's like. And I can't blame him for that. I never can. Never could. But it was just kind of a bad thing. On my way home, we had to stop somewhere, and I didn't want to get out of the car because I just didn't want to talk to anybody. And I didn't have my phone, so I was just looking around the car for like a pen and a piece of paper so I could draw. I happened to look in the console, and I saw a gun, which is normal because my dad always keeps a gun in his console, but it was the thought that went through my head afterwards that scared me half to death. Just a flash of a mental image came into my head. It was of me taking that loaded gun, putting it against my head, and pulling the trigger. In the moment that happened, I had gone into a full-on panic state. And the rest of the ride home, I was silent. And when we got home, I went into a dark space because darkness, I know it's kind of cliche. I mean, look how I'm dressed. Darkness is a friend of mine. It keeps me safe. It hides me. But my parents were arguing about something. Can't even remember what. And that whole time I was just thinking about that traumatic moment, experience that my own mind had given me, just that whole time. When I finally came out of that dark space, I told my mother what had happened. And it scared her to death. It scared my dad to death. Honestly, it's still affecting me to this day. Shooting guns with my dad is something that I've loved doing for a long time, and I can't even do that anymore. But it's just a thing you gotta live with. But it was in that moment when I realized that I truly needed help. And if I sometimes still get flashbacks of what if I had that memory. I still get flashbacks of that memory. And sometimes even scenarios of what if I had actually done it? What if I had followed through with that impulse? That impulsive thought that my own brain had decided to give me. That my own brain which is my greatest weapon, had become a weapon of my own destruction. So I did, instead of following through that impulse, I got help. I got set up with counseling. I'm on medication that keeps my depression and my anxiety to a minimum, to a functional matter, and I'm okay now. I mean, yeah, sometimes things do still happen. I'm not afraid to admit that, but it's important that even in your darkest moments, it's important to remember that there is still hope. You can still receive help, and it's never too late.
I just want to tell you, I'm jealous that